Welcome to this tutorial on how I designed a evening dress for myself. It's the first part, and this is a dress which is very much inspired by the fabric. I had an occasion, I had a fabric, and I fancied something new. So I'm using this really beautiful organza. I'm not 100% sure it's a pure silk or silk mix, but it's got this really nice slightly vintagey tulip print, which I think would be really nice for summer, and it's got this sort of freshness. So it's a fabric with lots of opportunity, but which also needs to be designed quite carefully. And when I first found the image, I had a really specific design in mind, but as I thought about it, I actually sort of changed my mind a bit. And what I did before I actually started designing it, I had an image I really loved, and I was sort of sure it would work, but I kept on questioning myself, and that's always a sign that you're actually not quite sure about the design. So what I did a quick mock-up in a different fabric, a trial and an actual dress, just so I could actually wear it around and see how comfortable do I feel, how does it fit it. And it turns out I actually like the design, which is not surprising. I love the image, but I can't see it working in that fabric, or I'm still not 100% sure. So what I'm going to do is draw out the different options and also the plan on how I'm planning to make it, to make sure it actually works for me. So sometimes when you're making something for yourself, it might be like you just spot a fabric or a design and you know it fit in perfectly in your wardrobe, and you can just make it straight away and you don't really have to think about it. But with some projects like these, it actually really helps to have like a project brief. So I'm treating myself very much as a client, because of course if you're doing a project for somebody else, you do have very strict parameters. It has to be a certain fabric for the occasion, and for a certain type of client as well, because who would buy your clothes? So I'm actually giving myself similar sort of rules and considering when I design it, what would work, what would feel comfortable, what works for the fabric too. So let's start drawing out this dress. Before we draw the dress out, let's quickly have a look at my inspiration images. One of the images I loved is this dress, because I love the simplicity of the shape, which works really well with the print. And of course, instead of the solid print or painterly print, I could just use a grosgrain ribbon. So I like the idea, but it might be a little bit too graphic for what I'm after. I also do always love Claire McCardle, but I want a dress which is really easy to put on, and some of the Claire McCardle is a bit too drapey, so I'm going to take the inspiration from that, but then maybe change it around a bit. So my first ideas were to basically either go with this sort of block idea, where you have like a block framed neckline and maybe even go down to the armhole. And then I have, of course, our lovely print on here. And then maybe again have like a solid color waistband. And then have that skirt. I do really love that idea of having quite a voluminous skirt. So some gathers here. And then have it opening here like this, and then it basically it folds onto each other like this, and then like this. So it's like a sort of fold there, and might even have some another layer. And of course you could also have again a solid band there. The only thing I'm not quite sure of, because that organza is really fine, I don't want it to collapse. So this is why, of course, this one had the printed on frames. If I use a frame out of grosgrain, which is a cotton Petersham. It might be too heavy. It's not heavy, but I don't want it to flop. I wanted to keep that shape. So that was idea number one. One thing I'm not quite sure is about what seams, because with Organza, I'm thinking about using just basic seams. Sometimes you get these little plugs you stitch in Organza, so I need to make some samples to make sure that it doesn't sort of pull and doesn't sit nicely. The other idea was to sort of go with a Claire McCardle, which is a look I always do, which is like a sort of really draped, nice draped front. And I think that would work really well when, of course, I have it fitted. So I apologize, that's really bad drawing. So like this, and then have some, you could again use a really nice grosgrain band here, and then have a really simple skirt like that. But I think it might be a little bit too, maybe a bit too distracting if a print sort of all gets missed. And I could of course do the neckline in red, but I'm not 100% sure. So what I'm thinking is, what I'm after is actually I would like to have a fitted bodice, so I can just put it on and it won't move around. But I'm not quite sure as whether I do a neckline like this, which is all regimental, which can look quite heavy and sort of sometimes it curves up slightly. If you use a straight line, you would have to use for the grosgrain. And the other option maybe is to do a more classic one, which I actually quite like, sort of quite delicate. So I might just do a slightly curved, like a ballerina's, maybe with a double thin strap, but like a ballerina's sort of classic tutu dress, which I quite like. And then the question, of course, is whether you just go with a straight seams like this. Other option would be just darts, but I'm using quite a fitted block, and my fitted block actually has seams, so it's always quite, I could change them to darts, but then I would have to refit it a bit. The other option I thought that might be quite nice is because because the fabric is so see-through, I will need to have a under bodice. So not just a lining, but like a stiffer bodice which goes underneath and holds everything up. So I could either just flatline or mount my organza to another fabric and then just have the look like that, and choose my florals quite carefully, because there's quite a lot of white, so I thought it might be quite nice for the bodice to pick out, and I can never find them when I look for them, is to pick quite a big bundle of flowers, and that could go right down the front, and then in the side panels again pick flowers again, so you have sort of the flowers quite placed rather than just random. It's too much white. I think I have to be quite careful with the flower print placement on that. And I think I definitely like the slightly constructed element of this skirt, where you have both the gathers but also the pleats, so you get this volume and the layers, and maybe even have the underskirt in white. I'm not quite sure, but these are my two bodice options, which will both go really nicely with that skirt. The other thing I then started thinking about, what is really nice about this fabric, is if you do add a little bit of gathers or volume like you have in the Claire McCardle, but I don't want to go down the full Claire McCardle route. So what my other options were, which I think I have been planning this in my head quite a lot, but what I think I'm going towards is doing a quite basic under bodice. And what I will do is, for my first trowel, I will cut like that, just completely straight, so I can add the grosgrain if I want to. So that would be my first step. So just cut a close-fitting bodice block like that, and I will basically copy probably my bra strap positions for that. So I know it sits nicely on my shoulder. And what I will do is, on the trowel, actually check how it looks like by just pinning on the grosgrain on the fabric. And then on the trowel, I can also decide whether I want to go for that really geometric look, which would enable me to put the grosgrain everywhere and frame it really nicely, or whether I want to have a more round, more natural bodice. So I think I'm going to definitely go my underbodice just completely plain like that. But then what I will also do when I'm trialing it is to decide whether I want, and I think I'm leaning towards this, but I'm not quite sure, is whether I want my bodice to be completely flat. It's just a sort of print, flat mounted organza, and then the big skirt to contrast. Or whether it's actually be nicer to have, instead of the seams in the organza, to maybe, I think it would be quite pretty because we got the pleat here. So I think it might be quite nice to have sort of pleats here. So you get a bit of 3D-ness, because of course you can either have the pleats maybe sort of up here. So I could move all my volumes just into here and have like that draping there, or of course the other option is to sort of have it asymmetric, or like this. So you still have your underbodice, which is constructed so it will fit closely, and it won't be like the Clever Cardle where it's quite loose, which I don't think will. I love it, but I'm always too fiddly if stuff that just held in with the ties. So I quite like an under-constructed garment for this. But what I will do is, first of all, is draft a basic fitted block with just a basic line, and then actually check the grosgrain. I will check the neckline. So first of all, grosgrain, because if I use grosgrain, everything has to be straight. If I say, oh, the grosgrain is too heavy, then I can check the neckline. And once I've done that, and I'm happy that on the actual trowel, I'm actually going to just hold on my fabric and then check the drape choices. So that's what I'm going to do. And sometimes I think if you have some garment, you have a really clear idea. If you're a bit unsure, and that's what I can totally tell I'm unsure, because I can't make a decision. I can't quite see it in my head how it look like. I love the idea of this one, but when I do it with my fabric, and it looks beautiful, but I'm not sure. That's where I can tell I'm not sure, and I shouldn't spend lots of time doing it. So I need to actually be quite systematic in my approach, make a trial first and check what will actually work best. Because what I might think is what might be actually more delicate and work better is just to have this as a waistband, which would be really beautiful, and then maybe just have spaghetti straps. So we will find that out once I've made the trial.